They said I had permission to take the hat off now, thank God. And excuse the glasses. If you're going blind, you might as well look cool while you're doing it. Let me add my congratulations to all of you graduates. I know this is a terrific milestone for you and your families. I want to add a special recognition to everyone who participated last night in that production. You have only burnished the reputation of Berklee School of Music, and I'm sure your school is well proud of you, as you should be proud of yourselves. I am accustomed to public speaking. I do it often, but this is the first time I've ever delivered a commencement, and apparently everyone was afraid I would screw it up somehow because I've been getting all kinds of suggestions about what I should talk about, and as if the end result would be universal jubilation or mass suicide if I didn't get it right. But what mystifies me the most is why I am standing here and receiving this award, given my inglorious resume in terms of academia. I barely, as Lucinda, I barely graduated high school. I did not go to college. I did not qualify for a music school of the caliber of Berklee. I never would have passed the audition. And to this day, I don't know how to read music. Woo! All right. Obviously, a lot of you hated theory class. Compound that with the fact that I've never had a #1 record, single or album, personally. I've never been nominated for a Grammy. I've never been nominated, thankfully, for the Rock Hall of Fame. If nominated, I will not run, and if elected, I will not serve. And so I came to the conclusion that the only thing that I could possibly give you is my story and let you draw your own conclusions from that. The one thing I did know when I was growing up is that I was a musician, and it was apparent to everyone around me. Unfortunately, I grew up in an environment where that was not necessarily a priority. I was a horrible student. I only wanted to do things that interested me in school, and as soon as I lost interest, I was disruptive, and that continued for pretty much my entire so-called academic life until I just barely graduated out of high school and found myself on the street. And I had two things that I could possibly do at that point. I could try and get a job and generate enough money to go to an engineering school and learn how to program computers, because that was the other thing I was interested in. Or I could just take my chances as a musician, and I spent a couple of weeks on the street and fortunately found my way into a band in Philadelphia. You won't remember the band, by the way. But at the time, I was a guitar player, and guitar was my obsession, literally my obsession. It was the only thing that mattered in my life. I didn't think about songwriting. I had yet to write a song. I didn't feel qualified to be a front man or a singer. The guitar suited me well, and I was able to develop enough technique to impress the people around me and actually get a job in a local blues band, which is what I did. That didn't last very long because there was a lot of upheaval in the music business, and everybody in my band, which was originally modeled after the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, a bunch of white people playing black music, to a band of white people taking acid. So, as soon as they discovered the Grateful Dead, they wanted to go to the country, get their heads together, and I was not quite to that point. So I started a band called the Naz, which lasted about 18 months. And then I found myself on the street again. And this is probably a more pivotal moment even than when the Naz got discovered, because that was an accident that probably couldn't be reproduced. But by the time I found myself on the street, I probably didn't even have a guitar anymore. I was still a musician, but I didn't even have an instrument to play, and I took any job that I could get. I wound up designing lights in a discotheque and living with clothiers in the West Village, which later affected my sense of style, by the way. But I was fortunate that I had left a trail of some good work and got asked to join the Albert Grossman organization, which essentially was a repository for some of the greatest acts in the world. Albert Grossman was the world's premier manager, and they were just starting to get into the record business, and they asked me to come in and interface with a lot of these old folk acts who had yet to get updated to the 60s. That's when this all happened. And I got paired up with acts like Ian and Sylvia and James Cotton and all of these old legacy artists, as well as some new artists. And my big breakthrough was when I was involved in the production of Stage Fright, the band's third album, I believe it was. And from there, I became a very successful producer. And at one point, I got sort of the bug to make a record of my own, a vanity project. I had no intention of becoming a performer. I just felt that I had earned the right to make a record for myself, and I was still writing. I was still learning about writing, actually. I made a record that had a minor hit called We Gotta Get You a Woman on it. It was actually played on the radio here in Boston until militant feminists misunderstood the lyrics and threatened to bomb the station. So the record only got so high, you know, and then it dropped off. And at first I was not a performer at all. I had no idea what it was like to go out and take my music on the road and perform it for people. And when I first performed, I couldn't get through a 20-minute set without blowing my voice out. That's how far behind the performance curve I was. But I persevered at that, and I persevered at the songwriting, and eventually I had a breakthrough. It was called Something Anything, as previously mentioned. And while it had several hit singles on it, the biggest thrill for me was when I met Wolfman Jack, who had like a 500,000 watt radio station broadcasting out of Tijuana, which he did from his home in LA. And he became my champion, and that helped me a lot because he could reach Chicago from Tijuana, which wasn't legal for any American radio station. So Something Anything was a big boon for me. But then people started referring to me as the male Carole King. And I was a Carole King fan, but it bothered me being compared to somebody else. You don't want to be compared to other people. You want other people being compared to you. And I went in a completely 180-degree direction on my next record. It was called A Wizard, a True Star. And I was pilloried by the label as well as the critics for not following up on the success of Something Anything. But there are two things to keep in mind here. I was a successful record producer, so I didn't have to fret about the success of my own records. And secondly, I started to see music as something different than what I had previously assumed. I was writing what everyone else was writing. I had plumbed a broken relationship that I had in high school for 3 whole albums. And suddenly realized I didn't care about this girl anymore. What am I doing? And I also realized there were a whole lot more things in my head musically from my experience. My dad hated rock and roll, so he would never have it played in the house, but I would get to hear Ravel, and I would get to hear Bernstein, and I would get to hear Gilbert and Sullivan. A broad range of stuff that maybe some of you didn't get exposed to when you were especially young, but it all got stuck in me, and I never realized it until that point that that was a significant part of my musical makeup, and that I was writing like a hypocrite. And so I made this crazy record called A Wizard, a True Star, in which I threw out all the rules of record making and decided that I would try to imprint as much as possible the chaos in my head right onto a record without trying to clean it up for everyone else's benefit. And the result was, as I mentioned, a complete loss of about half of my audience at that point. But you mentioned Trent Reznor, and other artists have cited that as being a major influence on them. And so I have a special pride for what essentially was my act of tyranny after having achieved commercial success. And this became the model for my life after that. And the irony was that I never learned anything in high school. But when I got out of high school, I learned to learn. And ever since then, I have absorbed anything that can be put in front of me that is of interest. And so I've learned not only how to expand the range of my musical expression, but I've also learned things like computer programming and video production and other sorts of things which any of you could easily absorb if you don't leave here thinking that your education is finished. Today, this appears to be the end of something, but it's really the beginning of something for you. I recognize there's great loss associated with this ceremony as well as triumph. There are friends that you may be saying goodbye to that you might never see again in your life. But the most important thing that you can take advantage of in the world of music is to see yourself. I eventually got to the point where music meant to me self-exploration more than anything else. I could objectivize my ideas, listen to them, and realize if I was full of crap or not, or whether I might be on the right direction. And I encourage everyone here to be brave in that respect, to be fearless in that respect. I have lost the ability to be insulted by critics. You never know the actual impact of what you do today and how it will actually turn out in the future. That album, A Wizard, a True Star, which was such an abomination to everyone at the time it came out, eventually became the signature moment in my career. And I hope everyone will feel the freedom and the fearlessness to undertake that when the time comes, because you may find that that's your defining moment. And I want to congratulate you once again. Thank you so much for your indulgence.